Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This time, we're going to be exploring something pretty interesting, a vision for modern living in the Puerto Rican countryside.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, imagine a peaceful retreat,
Sounds nice.
but with all the conveniences of city life.
Having your cake and eating it too.
Exactly. Our source material dives into this idea of dual advantage. Peace, ED, productivity all in one place.
That's the dream, isn't it?
And get this, the whole thing is the brainchild of Walter, a real estate broker with a deep connection to this vision.
Personal connection.
Very personal. We're talking helicopter services, satellite internet.
Whoa, hold on.
It's quite a package deal.
Yeah, I bet. From what I've seen, there's a really strong emotional element throughout the material.
I noticed that too.
It's more than just selling real estate.
For sure.
It's rooted in Walter's own experiences.
Right. So the material tells us that Walter grew up in Adjuntas, a mountain town in Puerto Rico. He describes his childhood home, this simple wooden house open to the mountain air, his dog Leon by his side.
Ah.
You can really feel the nostalgia in his words.
Yeah, I can imagine. He's going for that feeling of connection to nature, right?
Yeah, like a longing for a simpler time.
Exactly. And he's using some pretty interesting techniques to get there.
Like what? Fill me in.
Well, the tagline for his whole vision is, reconnect with nature, rediscover your roots.
Okay, I like that.
Right, it grabs you. But it goes deeper than that. He actually uses Robert Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions to connect with potential buyers.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm familiar with Plutchik's work. He identified 8 primary emotions, right?
That's the one.
But how's he using that to sell real estate?
Instead of just listing features, he creates a narrative that evokes specific emotions. He'll talk about the joy of waking up to birdsong, the anticipation of building your dream home in this peaceful setting.
Ah, I see. So it's not just about the property itself, it's about the feeling.
That's it, exactly. And he's deliberate about layering those emotions. For instance, he'll combine the joy of fresh mountain air with the trust of a secure investment. Creates that feeling of love, the love of a safe and happy home.
It's clever. I bet he also addresses some of the concerns people might have about, moving to a rural area, like staying connected.
Oh, absolutely. He tackles that head on. He emphasizes that there's satellite internet available so residents can work remotely, learn online, stay connected with family just as easily as they could in a city.
Makes sense. Trying to bridge that gap, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Between the peace of nature and, well, the demands of our modern, super connected world.
Right. And it's easy to think of Puerto Rico as this remote island, but it's actually pretty compact.
Yeah, you're never too far from an urban center.
Okay, so even tucked away in the countryside, you're not totally isolated. But what about accessing things like entertainment, education, even government services? Would you have to travel back and forth to the city all the time?
That's where Walter's vision gets really, really interesting. He goes beyond just relying on the island's existing infrastructure.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. What does he do?
He proposes, get this, a network of helicopter services.
Helicopters. Is he serious?
Totally serious, and not just for emergencies. He sees them being used for everything. Airport transfers, going to cultural events, business conferences, even just exploring the island.
Hold on, so you're saying part of this countryside living package includes hopping in a helicopter and zipping around whenever you want.
It's like rural living meets urban accessibility.
It sounds almost too good to be true.
Right. But it also brings up some questions, like how expensive would that be, and the logistics of it all.
I was just thinking that. How does he address those concerns?
He actually lays it out pretty well. He suggests a tiered system. At first, helicopter services would be included in the property price, like for a set period.
Okay.
Then residents could switch to an insurance model with a monthly fee or just pay-per-use.
So different levels of access based on your budget and needs. That's smart.
But there's also the environmental impact to think about, all those helicopters flying around.
Where does he address that?
He does. He proposes using electric helicopters to reduce noise and emissions, and the flight paths would be planned to avoid residential areas.
So he's thinking about minimizing the downsides. It's interesting how he's trying to balance the convenience and, well, luxury of this with being environmentally responsible.
It shows that he's aware of the need for sustainable solutions, even when we're talking about luxury living.
For sure. But zooming out a bit, I think it's worth considering the bigger picture. What does this vision tell us about, how our relationship with work and technology is changing? That desire for connection and escape.
It's a good point. On one hand, There's this pull towards a simpler life, back to nature.
Right.
But on the other hand, we're so tied to our devices, to the constant flow of information. It's like Walter's trying to find a way to bring those two things together.
Yeah, it's not about disconnecting completely.
Yep.
It's about choosing how we connect, having the best of both worlds.
Right. Exactly. The peace and beauty of the countryside, but with the option to connect to the urban world whenever you need to.
I think that resonates with a lot of people, especially those feeling overwhelmed by modern life.
Definitely. It makes you wonder, is this a glimpse into the future of living and working? Could this model catch on?
It's a possibility. As technology keeps advancing, who knows what's possible. Walter might be ahead of the curve here, but he's definitely tapping into something.
Totally. And what about the community aspect? We focus on individual experience, but surely there are social implications, right?
You're right. He did mention fostering connections through local events, farmers markets, things like that. But what about the bigger picture? Creating these communities in a way that's sustainable, both environmentally and socially.
Well, that's what we're going to get into next. He has a whole plan for sustainable development, community building, even economic opportunities within this whole model. It's pretty fascinating.
Okay, now I'm really hooked. Lead the way. I want to hear more.
All right, so let's dig into his vision for sustainable communities. He starts by emphasizing eco-friendly designs and technologies in the homes themselves.
Okay, so helicopters are a key part of this whole rural living vision.
Yeah, it's a pretty bold move.
But how does he actually see this working? Like, practically?
He lays out a couple main ways he sees these helicopter services being used for medical transport and for leisure travel.
Interesting. The medical part sounds pretty important, especially if you're living out in the countryside.
Yeah, that's a big one for a lot of people, I bet.
So tell me about that.
So he proposes a nationwide helicopter medical service, and it's actually included as part of the property package.
So you're saying if you buy one of these properties,
You automatically get access to emergency helicopter evacuation.
like a built-in air ambulance service.
That's the idea. He talks a lot about the peace of mind this would provide, especially for anyone who's a little worried about being in a remote area.
I bet. 200/7 access to medical care.
Rapid response time.
Makes you feel a lot safer.
Exactly. And that's not all. Remember the dual advantage concept?
Yeah. Peace and productivity.
Well, he wants residents to enjoy that peace without feeling cut off.
Isolated.
Right, disconnected from everything.
Well, how do the helicopters play into that?
Well, he proposes using that same helicopter network for leisure activities as well.
Now that sounds fun.
It is. Imagine you're in this tranquil mountain setting, and then you decide, hey.
I want to go to a concert in San Juan.
Exactly. Or maybe hit the beach.
Hop in a helicopter and boom, you're there.
That's the vision. And he's not talking about limiting it just to personal stuff. You could use it for airport transfers, business meetings in the city, all sorts of things.
It's like seamless travel between the countryside and the city.
Exactly. But of course, that brings up the question of cost.
Yeah, wouldn't a service like this be incredibly expensive?
He actually addresses that.
Okay.
It's a tiered system. So initially, the helicopter services would be included in the price of the property.
For how long?
For a set period. And then after that, residents could opt for like an insurance type model, a monthly fee.
Okay.
Or they could just do pay-per-use if they're not using it that often.
Makes sense. Different options to fit different needs and budgets.
Right. But what about the noise, the environmental impact?
Why?
All those helicopters.
No such as sustainable.
It's a valid concern, and he acknowledges it in his materials.
Good.
He proposes a few things, like using electric helicopters
Wow, interesting.
to cut down on noise pollution and emissions.
Okay.
And he also emphasizes that the flight paths would be carefully planned to avoid residential areas as much as possible.
Smart. So he's thinking about all the angles, trying to balance convenience with, being responsible.
It's a tricky balance for sure.
Definitely. But, this whole thing makes me think about our relationship with technology.
I was just thinking that.
We crave simplicity, a return to nature.
But we're also so connected, so reliant on our devices.
It's like he's trying to find a middle ground.
I think you hit the nail on the head.
Not about disconnecting.
Nah.
It's about being intentional, choosing how and when we connect.
That resonates with me.
Me too. I think something a lot of people are grappling with these days.
It is. Feeling overwhelmed by modern life.
Exactly. So is this the future?
Rural, living with high-tech connectivity, on-demand transportation. Maybe. Who knows?
What about the social side of things? Building community, does he address that at all?
Yeah, he talks about how shared values and a desire for a simpler lifestyle could lead to a strong sense of community.
Okay.
He mentions things like local events, farmers markets, outdoor activities.
Right, creating those opportunities to connect.
But I think there's definitely room for more discussion on the social impact. How this vision could affect existing communities and making sure everyone benefits.
Good point. Any new idea comes with challenges.
For sure. It's one thing to have a vision, but putting it into practice, that's the real test.
Totally. And speaking of putting things into practice, I'm curious to hear what he has to say about sustainable development,
Oh, that's next.
community building,
He gets into all of that,
economic opportunities.
even some pretty innovative housing designs.
Okay, lead the way. Let's hear it.
All right, so let's dive into sustainable communities. He starts by emphasizing eco-friendly design and technologies for the homes themselves.
We've been talking about this vision for countryside living in Puerto Rico with the helicopters and the focus on sustainability.
It's a pretty unique concept.
It is blending modern life with, a return to nature.
And I think what's really interesting is how Walter's not just thinking about individual properties, he's thinking about building whole communities.
Right, we touched on that earlier, creating these communities in a way that's sustainable both for the environment and socially.
Exactly. So he lays out this multifaceted approach. First, sustainable building practices.
Yep.
He wants to incorporate eco-friendly designs and materials right into the homes themselves.
Like what kind of stuff?
Solar panels, rainwater harvesting systems, using local and sustainable building materials.
So the homes are part of the landscape.
Not just plop down on top of it.
Right, minimizing the impact.
And it goes beyond just the building materials. He's big on permaculture principles.
Permaculture, okay.
Encouraging residents to grow their own food, create self-sufficient ecosystems right on their properties.
Like that.
It ties back into that whole reconnect with nature idea.
It's not just about pretty scenery.
Right. It's about actively participating, connecting with the land.
I like that. So it's not just about individual homes, right? He talks about community spaces too.
Oh, yeah. Community gardens, co-working spaces, recreational areas.
So people can connect and collaborate.
Building that sense of community.
That goes beyond just living near each other.
It's shared values, shared resources, a commitment to a more sustainable lifestyle.
I can see how that would appeal to a certain type of person.
Definitely. People looking for a change of pace,
Yeah.
who want a simpler life but still want to be connected to the world.
And to other people who feel the same way.
Exactly. Finding that balance between solitude and community.
It's an interesting concept.
It is. You retreat to your quiet country home, but then you have this vibrant community to connect with.
Best of both worlds.
He even talks about the possibility of small businesses popping up within these communities.
All kinds of businesses.
Artisanal crafts, farm-to-table restaurants, ecotourism.
Providing jobs and experiences.
Exactly. Creating the self-sustaining ecosystem, not just environmentally, but economically, too.
It's a pretty big vision, but like we said earlier, big visions come with big questions.
Of course. Affordability is one thing, but what about making sure these communities are accessible to everyone?
Right. Include.
He does say that it's important to create a diverse and welcoming environment.
Okay.
Talks about offering different housing options at different price points to attract a mix of residents.
That makes sense.
And he mentions possibly partnering with local organizations to provide resources and support for people who are new to the community.
It's good that he's thinking about these things.
Definitely. But like we said before, it's one thing to have a nice-sounding plan. It's another to actually make it happen.
The real test is in the execution, right?
Exactly. Can he actually translate these ideas into a reality that works for everyone?
I guess we'll have to wait and see.
But even if this particular project runs into roadblocks, I think there's a lot to learn from Walter's approach.
For sure.
He's asking some big questions about how we live, work, connect in this day and age.
He's pushing us to think outside the box.
To imagine new possibilities.
I think that's a great takeaway for our listeners. Even if you're not planning on moving to Puerto Rico anytime soon,
Right.
this deep dive is hopefully giving you some food for thought.
Maybe spark some ideas about finding a better balance in your own life.
It's all about finding that sweet spot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Between nature and technology, between being alone and being part of a community.
Finding a way to live a meaningful life, to contribute to something bigger than yourself.
And I think Walter's vision shows us that maybe, just maybe, those things aren't mutually exclusive.
It's a journey.
For sure.
And sometimes the most exciting journeys start with a bold vision.
Absolutely. So for our listeners who want to learn more about Walter's vision, you can find more information on his website, https://phoenixpuertorico.com.
And you can reach out to him directly at +1 787 223 2817 or walter@phoenixpuertorico.com.
He'd love to hear from you. And who knows, maybe he'll inspire you to create your own vision for a more balanced life.
That's what it's all about.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep striving for that balance in your own life.